Listen, if you think you're going to trick me into admitting what my age is by doing this podcast, you've got one thing coming up. Although I'll be the first one to happily admit that I am in my 40s.
Come on, that's so easy. I just have to tell people that you're the same age as Ash and Sachin. They'll work it out themselves, yeah.
What, in the same way that you're the same age as, I don't know, Sir Mick Jagger?
Yeah, stop taking the mic.
What was that?
That was my Mick Jagger impersonation.
Welcome to the Shabby and Man podcast. We're partners, parents, podcasters, broadcasters.
And we're everything else in between.
And in this episode of the Shabby and Man podcast, we thought we would talk about something inspired by the lockdown scenario all around us. The world is in lockdown mode. COVID-19 has wreaked havoc across the world.
I believe it's become part of the dictionary as well.
That's right. I think they've added 3 new words. COVID-19, self-isolation and possibly social distancing. I'm not quite sure, but the Oxford Dictionary has added them this morning. And while everybody else is talking about what COVID-19 actually is, and while we are all putting our hands together, clapping our hands rather, in praise of the frontline heroes.
All the key workers.
And
that includes people who we don't think about, like even the bin men.
Absolutely. Bin men, those who are manning corner shops, anybody who is working and not self-isolating because they're providing a key service so that society can still keep running. Services can still be delivered. Thank you so much. So we thought, that naturally when we look back on this, when our kids are all grown up,
hopefully it's once in a lifetime. I don't think it's something like this is going to happen again.
Yeah,
hopefully,
let's just hope
crossed,
it's a once in a lifetime, once in a generation thing. And so we thought, you and I are of a certain age. I'm sure we've got a few stories to tell. So we look back on our lives, your life in London, your life in a boarding school in India, so you can split your time
There's
between
more to me than just one boarding school in India. I've lived in India for so many years.
Boarding school in India, a dhaba. Those who've heard the previous episodes of the Shabby and Man podcast, they know your dhaba and your love of Pankaj Udas and samosa. And
I used to live in Uttar Pradesh for many years.
Yes.
I used to live in Delhi for many years.
Oh, all right. Fantastic. So all of that. So in our lifetime, and me growing up in Delhi and Bhopal, Indore, several places, what do we remember? Life-changing events.
What do you mean growing up in several places? You were like shunted around?
No, my dad was in government service, so he was in a transferable job, as they say in India. Although a bulk of my growing up years was in Delhi because dad was posted in Delhi for the longest time. But then I was born in Calcutta, then I came over to Delhi. And then I think we spent a few years, 2 years in Indore, a few years in Bhopal, 1 year in Kanpur for me. And then we were in Delhi for the whole time. So yes, many, many memories. Let's talk about life-changing events or big events that made the headlines, at least in our country.
You mean something that I still remember all these years later?
Something that you still remember. Now, I'm going to go back to the 80s because I'm a 70s child. You're a 20s child. I don't know what you're going to come up with. Don't give me any war stories, please. So, what is it? What are you going to pick as the first thing, your first memory of a big event?
I wish I was born in the roaring 20s. It sounds wonderful.
Roaring 20s? And what were the 70s called? No, swinging 60s. And did the 70s have some kind of a label as well? Bell-bottom 70s?
Let's just say if you remember the 70s, you haven't lived.
Please. All right. Now you're talking like Sir Mick Jagger. Okay. So what is the big event that you are going to pick as your first event that you remember as being a big deal?
Well, as you mentioned, my boarding school, I'll tell you that. I must have been about 9, 10, maybe 10, 11.
Which year was this again?
And John Lennon died. I didn't actually know who John Lennon was. But I remember it was a big deal in the school and there were these posters.
How would you find out in school? It's not that you're going to the library to read the paper every morning.
If you're in a boarding school, you live together. You at night. You know how boarding schools work.
What, did you all huddle around a wireless in the dormitory?
No. Between 8 and 9, you're allowed to listen to music. The seniors are.
Yeah.
You have to strain your ears and try to hear a bit. And they used to play a lot of Jim Morrison, the Doors,
so John Lennon,
whatever was.
Assassination was a big deal.
So it was, I mean, us youngsters didn't really know who he was or anything. It was much later that we found out, what the Beatles were. But I remember this big buzz. That's my earliest memory of, everyone saying, oh my God, John Lennon's died. And us younger ones were thinking, who?
Who is John Lennon?
Yeah.
For me, I think it has to be 1981, I wasn't even 10. I was much younger than 10. Prince Charles and Diana's wedding. It happened here. We didn't have TV back then. We were in Indore, I still remember. But the national paper, the most widely circulated paper in Indore is called Nayi Duniya.
Can I just butt in again?
Yes.
You didn't have TV because you're Bengali and education is everything, or you didn't have TV because TVs weren't around?
No, because TVs those days had just come to, I think they'd come to like every city. Indore was a small city in Madhya Pradesh. So every city had like one TV tower, and I think it had like one big TV where people could gather and watch it together or something like that. It definitely hadn't been rolled out on a commercial basis for every family to own a television.
In 1981, you sure?
Yes, not in Indore, definitely, I know that. But we would watch the odd film on a Saturday or a Sunday at somebody's house or one of these places.
This is where I'm confused, because I was in India in the 80s as well. A bit later, I think it was in 84, 85, 83, 84. And there was definitely TV there. I used to watch Khandan and...
No, so that came a little later. That is suddenly...
Hum Log. Was it Hum Log?
This is... I'm talking about 1981, and I'm not talking about Delhi. I'm not talking about the big cities. I'm talking about Indore. Yeah. 85. So I remember the newspaper was Nayi Duniya, and it was a newspaper in Hindi. That was the national paper. I don't think you got any English papers back then. My mom and dad would be able to correct me. And the front photograph was that famous photograph of Princess Diana and Prince Charles kissing on the balcony of Buckingham Palace. It was a grainy black and white photo, or at least I remember it as being a grainy black and white photo, and we knew it was a big deal because everybody was talking about it on the radio, and this was like almost a half-page spread of this black and white photo.
I actually remember the wedding because I was here in London at the time.
And it was a big deal. It was televised and all of that. Were you old enough to know what the big deal was, or was it just that royalty?
No, I was quite old by then.
I think my next event is something which I should remember, especially since Bollywood is my mainstay now and it is such an integral part of my work. But I don't remember, sad to say. This was Amitabh Bachchan's big accident on the sets of Coolie. Now, when I look back on the newspapers from the time...
I actually remember it.
Do you remember it? Were you here or were you in India?
No, the thing was that I was here when he had the accident.
Yeah.
But when the movie was released...
The following year,
I was spending 3-4 years in India. So I do remember. So
I'm because I know that life came to a standstill. Everybody kind of was praying for him every single day. There were updates from the hospital, from Breach Candy. First it happened in Bangalore, then he was moved to Breach Candy Hospital. And the big news was Indira Gandhi was Prime Minister at the time, and she was a family friend of the Bachchans, right? They knew each other in Allahabad. So the Prime Minister of India flew down to Breach Candy to see him and all of that. I don't have any recollection.
Have you actually seen the movie? We're talking about the movie Coolie.
Coolie, yeah.
I think it came out in 83.
84, something like that. 83, yeah.
And I remember going with, I think, my relatives or my friends. I was too young to go with my friends. I must have gone with my relatives. And I remember going in India. And I remember going and watching the movie, and where, is it Puneet Desar?
Yeah.
Puneet Desar, where he...
Yeah. Gives him one punch.
Gives him an elbow. Yeah. They freeze the frame. They show it in slow motion.
And there's a big deal. They say that this is where it happened.
And they show it again and again and again. This is where it actually happened.
Was it an edge of a sharp table?
I can't
He fell
remember.
on a table very badly, I think, and kind of the edge went into his stomach and ruptured his intestines or whatever it was. Yeah, so, no, you two... answer your question, I haven't seen Coolie. But this must
You must have seen Coolie number 1 with Govinda.
Coolie number 1 I've seen, probably with you. But Coolie, I haven't seen. And this must have been a big event back then, right? What would you remember? What's next on your list? I know what I have on my list.
I don't actually have a list, but I do remember that you and me, I'm talking about very famous...
events.
Celebrities. You and me were watching the news one night, a couple of years ago, 5-6 years ago. We were watching the news, 11 o'clock at night, and suddenly it was breaking news about Michael Jackson.
10 years ago.
Was it 10 years ago?
Do you know how I remember?
10 years ago.
I'll tell you how I remember. It was late in the evening, late at night rather.
Yeah, we were watching news night or something.
You were watching something on TV, and I was typing up my first book on my laptop. And then you said, hey, hang on, just listen, there's something, they've got some breaking news 10 years ago. So this was Michael Jackson, right?
Do you remember there was aerial shots of a helicopter watching the ambulance go down and all that? I think the first time I really watched something.
Way before that, I'm going to go back to the 80s now, and I'm going to recall 2 events that happened very close to each other, both in 1984. This is when I really remember where I was, what I was doing, what I was wearing, what time of day it was.
We're not doing this is not chronological. You don't have to do 1980 में ये
किया, I know.
1981 में ये किया, 1982 में ये किया.
सारे बड़े events हुए 80s में, early 80s में मैं क्या करूं? तो यही 2 मेरे बस events हैं. और One was, it was a very big deal for India, our first man in space, squadron leader Rakesh Sharma. And I know this even more because my sister was a huge fan. And my sister had these scrapbooks. So she cut out everything about Rakesh Sharma that came out in the papers, in the newspapers, in the magazines, India Today, you name it. Yeah? And he was quite a poster boy. And there were two of them, Rakesh Sharma, Ravish Malhotra. Till the last minute, we didn't know which one of them would go to space and the other one would be the standby, right? So my sister had these scrapbooks.
I know this because I was there as well.
Yeah, and years later, when my dad was posted back in Delhi and my dad was in a very senior position in the postal department.
What position?
He was secretary, Department of Post, so which is the head of, he was the head of philately, so head of stamps and issuing stamps and all of that, global, national head, yeah? My dad met Rakesh Sharma at a function, yeah? This was years later. And he must have told Rakesh Sharma that my elder daughter was a huge fan and all of that. So he said, wow, and so somehow it transpired that my dad ended up sending those scrapbooks to him and he autographed each and every one of them for my sister and sent them back. So Rakesh Sharma going into space. And I always talk about this incident, even when I talk about his upcoming biography in Bollywood, that I remember by this time we had our own television sets, but it was a black and white TV. We huddled around the TV sets because in the evening, the Prime Minister of India, Indira Gandhi, was going to have a conversation with him in space, her in Delhi.
I know what you're going to say, but you said a very famous quote here.
Yes. So when she, this was our first glimpse into what space travel is like, because we weren't there when Neil Armstrong landed on the moon, or Yuri, what was the other person? Gagarin. Right. Yeah? Weren't there. I mean, I don't remember any of that. So Rakesh Sharma showing us how food was in tubes and how, weightlessness and all of that. So right at the end, she said, "Upar se Bharat kaisa dikhta hai?" Huh? From outer space, what does India look like? Without hesitation, he said, "Sare jahan se acha." That was the headline the next day in all the papers. And I think it's one of those moments where, even if you don't think about being an Indian or how proud you must be because of this and that and your heritage and culture and all of that at any other time, it is moments like these that make you so proud of an achievement, that you can claim collectively as Indians.
Now you said two people were chosen to go up into space.
Yes.
Now we have a connection as well.
The two people were trained, but only one went.
But what about the third person that we actually ended up working with?
Oh my goodness me,
yes.
I forget about him. We actually ended up being on radio at the same time as this gentleman whose name is Yuri, and he was the third person, Yogesh Suri. He was in the Air Force or the Army as well, right? He was in the Air Force, I think, right?
Yeah.
And he was the third person, yeah. So there were two standbys, but I think the most prominent ones were Rakesh Sharma and Ravish Malhotra. Still remember. What else? Don't you remember any of the other big...
1984. Are you on 83, 84?
I'm on 84
You
right
must remember the riots after Indira Gandhi got assassinated.
That's why I said two events close together. Because Indira Gandhi was still Prime Minister when Rakesh Sharma went into space. Must have been in the spring or summer of 84. And who can forget 31st October 1984, Indira Gandhi was assassinated. And although we were very young and you knew that schools were closed and all of that, because we were in Delhi at the time.
Delhi was
absolutely terrifying. And I remember those days. We used to live in these flats in Saket, all of us friends, in these beautiful flats. And our dads at night, in groups of 4 or 5, would patrol the what would you call it? The enclosure, the entire,
perimeter of the block.
Perimeter of the block, and they would patrol it every night to make sure that nobody came with, because there were people there was rampant looting in all the high streets, lathi lekar log sab kuch loot rahe the, from ice cream cartons to this and that. Windows were smashed. I remember there were 4 Sikh families within our thing, and we were all friends. We were all, we know their mums and dads. We played with the kids, and we made sure that nobody kind of told anyone who lives where. And it was a very scary scenario. I especially remember these patrol things, that at night when we would say goodbye and good night and say go to bed, our dad would say, okay, today's my turn with so and so, with Mr. Sharma and so and so and so and so. 5 of us are going to be patrolling from say 10 in the night to 5 in the morning, So those were scary times. Where were you? Were you in India or were you here?
I was in India at the time. I was in UP. I was on the border of India and Nepal, where it wasn't that bad, but Delhi's not far from there.
Yeah, Delhi's not far. I think it was all of India that erupted suddenly into this very...
I mean, the closest big city to me is Lucknow.
Yeah.
And Banaras probably.
And what made it so poignant was the fact that because Delhi is so close to Punjab and Delhi has such a massive population of Sikhs, who've made Delhi their home, right? Later when we lived in Lajpat Nagar, one of the first places where I came, even when I was a kid.
Lajpat Nagar was a displaced colony.
It was a
That's how it
colony
started.
for displaced Punjabis when the partition happened. So we knew so many friends, and Sikhs were an integral part of Delhi society. Nobody even thought of them as, people who you need to be suddenly aggressive towards only because two Sikh bodyguards happened to have assassinated the Prime Minister. Those were very, very
turbulent times.
And I remember it so well.
Terrible piece of trivia I've always known from that time, that that same morning that she got assassinated, or the day before, she was meeting Peter
Ustinov.
Yeah, Peter Ustinov, who's the actor.
Yeah, who was in Delhi at the time.
He was in Delhi at the time,
right?
and she was meeting him.
Huh. Wow. See, we remember strange things, right, about world events, and this would be a world event.
This is a world event.
This is a world. There's one more thing that I missed out in the 80s. Again, I remember it only as an India Today cover, because I wasn't into cricket then. I was far too young, but my dad was.
Are you skipping back to 1983 by any chance?
I'm skipping back to 1983 when India won the World Cup, beating the big guns. West Indies, Indians were completely written off. They were the underdogs. And I think the only way, my dad's favorite way of listening to, a bit like you, I think even today, my dad would any day prefer a radio commentary to watching cricket on TV. But now, of course, times have changed. But it was such a big deal. 1983 Cricket World Cup. I still remember the India Today cover. So it's very strange. Prince Charles and Diana's wedding, I remember the newspaper headlines.
I was in London at the time of the World Cup final, and I was with my class friends, and we weren't really bothered about it. And it happened, but then afterwards...
Was it a big deal for your mum and dad, for people like your mum and dad who came from India and therefore they had stronger ties?
Maybe for my dad and his friends. My mum was not really...
Because you wouldn't have been following cricket sitting here in London. I'm sure you were supporting Arsenal.
Yeah, but World Cup was a big thing.
Huh.
And we all knew who Kapil Dev was, and we all knew Sunil Gavaskar.
See, I have a feeling you knew because you had lived in India for a bit. Yeah. Or had you not left for India then?
I'd come back to my boarding school, but I was going again for 3 years.
Yeah.
Guys, pay attention here. If you don't do well in studies, they kick you from country to country.
You get shunted around.
And then you end up learning Indian history, English history.
Oh, you mean you end up learning neither?
Or you end up learning neither.
What do you say in Hindi? Dhobi ka kutta, na ghar ka, na ghat ka.
And what do you say in English?
What?
I can't remember. Actually, I can. Between a rock and a hard place.
Oh, well, there you go. Between a rock and a hard place. Speaking of radio...
Yeah, speaking of radio, what are you going to say about radio?
I was going to say that, even to this day, I don't know whether it's because we are on radio.
Because something about radio just come to my head, that talking about great big events, very big events. I was on one Sunday morning, I remember the Sunday morning, I used to do this morning show, so I had to be in the studio by 8. And
this is your Delhi days on radio.
This is my Delhi days on radio. And... there was a kind of routine that I used to get up and I used to put on BBC World Service at about 6:30 in the morning. And all this news was coming out that Princess Diana has been in a car crash and things are very sketchy then. And, so I went into the studio. I'm not sure whether I should say anything. I was listening to the radio. So, throughout the show, I was saying, there's been a huge development in Britain. Maybe we should tune into the news.
Yeah.
Because
so you found out much before they actually
because the Indian channels hadn't said anything.
Yes.
I don't know, what the protocol was, and I didn't want to be the one to suddenly go out and say it in case...
It wasn't right.
I mean, I knew something... we knew there was an accident, but she hadn't been declared dead. So I'll always remember that.
That would have been a huge
Because one time I'm doing this fun, silly kind of show, and my other ear is, watching the news channels.
Yeah. Your ear can't watch, but I know what you're trying to say.
My other ear is tuned into
the news channels. And, this... Had you been here then, this would have been the big news, right?
It would have been. It was big news there as well, because it was dominating all the TV coverage the next day.
Yeah. You mentioned how I'm talking a lot about the 80s, but now I think I would zoom straight to the 90s. And the other event that I remember that I look back on as being life-changing was when I was at uni, was liberalization. When liberalization happened in India and all these satellite channels suddenly overnight sprung up everywhere, that was a big deal for us. You know, up until liberalization, only your friends who had been on holidays abroad, or your cousins and your uncles and aunts who lived in America and England and Canada and Australia, when they came to visit you, you know, they'd get you, even if it was a bar of soap. You know, now I realize what it was, probably from Tesco's essential hand cream or whatever it was.
We had the standard every time we went to India.
Yeah.
You had to buy one Parker ballpoint pen.
Yes.
And maybe
Marks and Spencer.
And maybe something which says St. Michael's on it.
Yeah.
And Quality Street probably.
Yeah. So those kind of things for us, for those of us who were in India and who hadn't been on those many foreign holidays. In fact, you know, I hadn't been on any foreign holidays then at all. Soon after, then I started with my mom first, and then of course America, here, there, everywhere. But up until then, it was such a big deal for us to get something which we only saw. We'd only see the brands, you know, in films and on television shows, but even television shows which were on Doordarshan.
So what does liberalization mean?
Liberalization,
that you could buy it in the shops there?
Yes, liberalization allowed all these foreign countries to trade in India. Suddenly Pepsi, Coke. But I think for many, many years, that could be the case even now, but at least at the start, for many years, the majority of the, in a partnership, say Pepsi or Coke, you know, partnered with an Indian company, the majority of the stakes were still with the Indian company. So I remember when Pepsi first came to India, it was called Leher Pepsi, because Leher was the Indian company.
Leher chips.
Leher chips. And I still remember the Sunday edition of the newspaper, was it Times of India, one of these papers, gave out vouchers that cut out this voucher and take it to the shop and you'll get a free Leher Pepsi kind of thing. What a big deal it was. You know, first the bottles which had been around in the rest of the world for the longest time ever. Then when cans came, you know, with ring pulls, that was such a big deal. And suddenly all of these oil of Fule and, you know, all the things that we are, so Toblerone chocolates, you only associate with travel and abroad and exotica.
It's so strange you mention that, because one of my good friends, still a good friend of mine from my pony school days, his family owned Campa Cola, which had
a factory in Delhi, right?
It was a Delhi-based drink. So there was Thumbs Up and Campa Cola, all these Indian drinks.
Yeah.
And now we have to go to Indian restaurants in London.
Yeah, to be able to get a taste of Thumbs Up.
To pay for Thumbs Up and Limca.
Thumbs Up spelled THUMS.
Yes.
Without a B. So liberalization, that's why I'm saying it was such a big deal suddenly. But make no mistake, initially when these things flooded the Indian market, they were still priced quite high. So, you know, it's not that your average person on the street would suddenly go and instead of having a Thumbs Up, they'd say, give me a Coke. But it was aspirational because we'd seen it in movies and this and that. You know, that was something everybody wanted. And then, of course, people embraced it. Then, you know, how it went completely the other way. And now it's possible. Suddenly they were...
Actually, that reminds me of something else.
Yes.
Were you part of this? I can't remember. But
are you talking about custom seized shops?
No.
You are not. Where you would go and get your Versace fix. And your
how do you know about that?
Louis Vuitton.
Well, I wouldn't talk about it here, okay?
Yes.
But
Listen, they weren't smuggled, okay? By custom seized, it means whatever they had seized at the customs at the airports, they were official shops which were allowed to sell them off.
Yeah, but they were mostly fake, I think.
Yeah, that's why it was.
That's why they were seized.
Yeah, well, there you go.
I think. As I must emphasize the word I think.
Yes.
Because I don't know.
What were you going to say?
I was going to say that, I can't remember if you were part of it, but when KFC and all came into the country,
yes,
they
in India.
got in touch with
riots.
me.
There were riots as well.
There were riots about the chicken. But, why were there riots? I remember there were riots.
There were riots, I remember, during the Miss World contest that Amitabh Bachchan was either hosting or he was a judge. Or I still remember, I can't remember the exact story. But there was something about, did it have something to do with the way it was made? That people said it might not be halal or it might affect religious sentiments?
I do remember there were riots, but I can't remember what it was.
Right? There was something like that.
But I remember that a couple of us, 3-4 of us, were asked, because we were on radio at the time.
Were taste tested?
No. We were asked to do like a 2-hour program saying, hi, you know, you're listening to KFC FM.
Yeah.
And coming up next is Brian Adams.
Yeah. So it was a big deal.
And that kind of thing. You know, so I'd go sometimes to KFC just to hear my own voice.
Yeah.
And, you know.
Oh, you mean these were in-house?
So they're playing all of the KFC.
All
you know,
of the KFCs. Yeah.
So, you know, you suddenly hear me saying, yeah, that is finger-licking good. Over to the next song now.
Yeah. And alongside liberalization was, like I said, the satellite TV boom in India. Suddenly everybody was watching Bold and the Beautiful, Santa Barbara. These were the main ones, yeah? And then not too far behind. All the other Indian channels kind of, Star and Z, and everybody suddenly had all the imports that, from Fraser and Dharma and Greg and Friends, and I can't remember the rest of them, but, everything that the world was watching, we were watching it at the same time, which was so thrilling. So,
but isn't when you were doing your Z News days, wasn't that a big event for you that day?
Yes,
that was like your second or third show, wasn't it?
Yeah. So I did this stint on television, on national television, and Z News was.
We had just got married by that time. We were just married.
We just got married. Z News was beamed across the world. In fact,
and let me just tell one more thing to all the listeners that what most people don't know is that you weren't paid that much. Most of your money went in blow drying your hair and catching the taxi to the studio.
That's true. It was the start of my career. I had to prove myself first before I could, behave like a diva and say, I'm only going to do this. I'm not getting out of bed for less than whatever it was.
Yeah, but my point was, why did you every day have to go to this hairdresser?
No, because I just wanted to, my hair to look right, even though it didn't. But nonetheless, that's a different story. But yeah, I think the second week into my news job on national television, and then I had friends calling me from Dubai and all over the place saying, we saw you reading the news. So it was obviously I think it went beamed internationally as well.
73 countries.
73 countries. So there I was reading the news, and now I have so much respect for people who read the news on television because they're producers who are constantly saying things to you in your ear, and you have to concentrate and still read the teleprompter properly at the same time and do all the interviews and everything you're meant to do. The elections were coming up, and Rajesh Pilot at the time was this up-and-coming Congress politician. He was tipped to be the next Congress leader because he was doing very well. He was massively popular. Rajesh Pilot was on a campaign trail in Dausa, just outside Rajasthan. And I remember I was reading the news when the news suddenly broke that Rajesh Pilot had met with an accident and he was on his way to hospital, and within half an hour it was confirmed that he was actually dead. All this while you're reading the news. So suddenly, there's somebody saying into your ear that, Shabnam, we are dropping the next story. Just say we are crossing live to so-and-so. When you are about 10 days into your brand new job, that is the last thing you want. But this is where I have to give full credit to the lady who hired me, who trained me, to the entire Z News team. They were so fabulous. And I knew that if I could get through that evening, and you know how news reading works, you were given a shift. So I would have to read the news at 6 o'clock, at 9 o'clock, at 11 o'clock in the evening, prime time. So I knew that if I just held my nerve and got through those 3 bulletins, I would be able to do anything. And I think that's been my mantra ever since. I remind myself in challenging times in the media that, come on, I've read the news on the day that Rajesh Pilot died. I'm sure I can do this. It's been a bit like broadcasting from home, as I have been for the last 3 weeks due to coronavirus. And first I thought, there's no way I'm going to be able to do it. Now I'm perfectly comfortable and I feel fantastic that we're still able to talk to our listeners and stay connected to
Have you ever thought about the people who live with you?
Yes, I have.
Who have to stay quiet all the time?
That is why my show is at a time when most nocturnal creatures are fast asleep, which is my 3 housemates, you and the 2 kids. So I'm infinitely grateful for that. Well, so there you go. Some of the highlights from Manish Sahi, Mick Jagger's life. And
I wouldn't really call them highlights. Yeah, well, they're highlights.
Not highlights, but memorable events. And
yes,
memorable not just for us personally, but memorable either for the
life-changing
nation.
events.
Life-changing events.
Which we remember.
A bit like the COVID-19 pandemic, which the world will remember, once we are on the other side and our kids grow up. I'm sure this is something they're going to talk about.
So it just leaves for us to say, stay safe.
Stay indoors.
Stay indoors. Look after yourself.
And make sure you tune into our podcast. Make sure you recommend, review.
All the usual apps. You know where to find us. Take care. Till next time. This time we did it quite quickly, didn't we?
Well, yeah, we did. Until next time, that's it. Stay safe and stay with us. We'll bring you more stories on the Shabby and Man podcast. Bye-bye.